But we do know the differences between races must have begun with mutations. And we know of one mutation that's still affecting evolution today.
The story starts with a gene, a single instruction written in the 4 letters of the genetic code. A gene can be thousands of letters long. If we wrote out on paper all the genes it takes to spell out a human, this is what we'd get. 23 pairs of very long drawers, representing our 23 pairs of chromosomes. There are 100,000 genes in here, 6 billion letters altogether, carrying all the instructions needed to build and operate a human body.
Packed in this one drawer alone are tens of thousands of pages, each page covered in line after line of genetic code. Of the thousands of genes in here, one of them carries the instructions for making part of our hemoglobin, the stuff that makes our blood red and carries oxygen around the body. There are about 500 letters in this gene. A mutation in one of them, just one letter out of the 6 billion in this archive, changed human history.
Since almost the beginning of humankind, people here on the coast of West Africa have been making a living from the sea. But about 4,000 years ago, they were threatened by a deadly disease. Today we call that disease malaria. The fact that people are still living here is a testament to evolution. In fact, to the power of a single mutation. Carried by mosquitoes, malaria is caused by a tiny parasite that's injected into the bloodstream with every bite from an infected insect. In weeks, the parasite can decimate its victim's red blood cells, the cells that carry oxygen around the body. A parasite works its way into a red blood cell. There it multiplies. Soon the cell bursts, releasing new parasites to infect other cells. Malaria is widespread in West Africa, infecting the majority of children. Many get sick enough to come to hospitals, like this one in Dakar, Senegal. But most manage to live with the disease rather than die from it, which is what has long intrigued Ronald Nagel, a blood specialist from New York.
How are you? Very well.
Today, Nagel is visiting 2 of Senegal's top pediatricians, Doctors Mohamedou Fall and Dembel Sow. Here at their clinic, there are always a few seriously ill malaria patients, like this little girl, who was admitted a week ago unconscious.
So, this is a patient you think has cerebral malaria.
Her records show she also had a high fever.
Very high fever.
Drugs have it under control at the moment, but she is still in danger. The fear is that the parasite has invaded her brain, which would mean she has cerebral malaria.
The most serious cases of malaria here are cerebral malaria. When children have that, they are comatose or some brain suffering. They cannot stand up, and often they are not conscious.
This happens when the red cells that have the parasite inside clog up the small vessels in the brain. And suddenly the brain doesn't have enough circulation, doesn't have enough blood, oxygen. So that creates a very severe problem, and it can actually kill the patient.
But most children don't die from malaria, and Nagel is interested in why. 7-year-old Mbaya, for instance, has the disease, but is doing fine. The finger prick is upsetting, but they hope it will confirm she is genetically protected from malaria.
Voilà, merde.
Just a couple of drops of blood are all it takes for the test. The blood is bathed in acid. And under the microscope, Mbaya's cells immediately take an odd sickled shape. They're reacting to the acid, and it's this reaction that provides the crucial protection from malaria. When the parasite invades red blood cells, its waste product makes the cells acidic, so they sickle. As the deformed cells travel through the bloodstream, their sickled shape targets them for destruction by the body, and the parasite dies with them. But why do the cells sickle in the first place? If we could enter a red blood cell, we'd see inside the hemoglobin molecules that pick up oxygen in our lungs and transport it around the body. The instructions to make these hemoglobin molecules are carried in our genes. All genes come in pairs, one from mother, the other from father. A mutation in either one of the hemoglobin genes will change the hemoglobin that gene makes, half the total. The mutation in this story is tiny, involving just a single letter. But it's enough to cause the hemoglobin molecules made by that gene to change shape. Now, if the cell is invaded by a malarial parasite and becomes acidic, these altered molecules stack into rigid rods, and the red blood cells that contain them sickle. So Mbaya will survive her malaria because these cells and the parasites they contain are eliminated from her body. Every one of us has a host of tiny mutations like the sickle defect lurking in our genes. Mostly, their effect is so minor that having a single copy of a mutant gene is irrelevant, neither good nor bad. Only if a mutation suddenly becomes helpful or harmful will it matter, which is what happened when malaria first emerged in Africa 4,000 years ago.
People that had one copy of the gene were able to survive their infection, their malaria infection. They would not die of it. Hence, they were able to grow up, get married, have children, and pass the genes on to the next generation. This is selective pressure. That gene had an advantage in that particular environment for those carrying it. Now, the consequence of all of this is, of course, that the number of people carrying a single copy of the gene begin to increase in the population. For example, in Senegal, there is about 15 to 20% of the population carrying the gene. In other parts of Africa, where there's even more malaria, it can go up to even 40% of the population.
But why doesn't everyone have it if the sickle gene is so useful? The answer is that there can be too much of a good thing, as Fatou and Cheka Sarr found out when they married and had children. Both had a single copy of the sickle gene, and so they're protected from malaria. According to the odds, each of their children had a 50% chance of also getting a single copy of the mutated gene. But one child in 4 would inherit both parents' normal gene, so wouldn't be protected. And another 1 in 4 would get both sickle genes, which is what happened to their daughter, also named Fatou. And as a result, she has a painful and debilitating disease called sickle cell anemia. In Senegal, where hard physical work is the norm, especially for women, sickle cell anemia can be devastating. Fatou's mother is already training an older daughter how to grind grain, something Fatou might never manage. Small and fragile for a 5-year-old, she can barely keep up with her friends and sisters. Because both Fatou's hemoglobin genes are mutated, all her hemoglobin is affected, not just half. And the molecules form into the rigid rods that cause sickling of the red blood cells, even when there are no malarial parasites around. In fact, almost any exertion will trigger a sickling crisis. Cell after cell sickles. The deformed cells jam in narrow blood vessels, cutting off blood flow and causing excruciating pain. Modern drugs will help Fatou survive her sickle cell anemia, but her life will be hard.
Par rapport aux autres enfants, Fatou, elle est toujours paresseuse devant ses amis. Elle joue, si les enfants jouent, elle est derrière eux, et après, elle ne peut pas jouer comme les autres. Elle est toujours paresseuse.
C'est très difficile, hein? C'est très difficile pour un enfant de tenir cette maladie, surtout quand elle est SS. Parce que quand elle joue avec eux, elle veut bien jouer, mais elle ne peut pas vivre ses organes. Tous les organes ne marchent pas. Puis elle se trouve dans des conditions extrêmement difficiles pour se déplacer. Voilà la raison fondamentale qui explique que la maladie est si terrible.